This is the 6Three podcast. Your home for the most in-depth analysis on all things sports, entertainment, and basically anything else you can come up with. Where we have some of the hottest takes, some of the craziest takes,
But there he goes.
some of the dumbest takes,
I have an IQ of 48.
and where we believe that opinions are like. And now, to your hosts, Joel, Isaiah, and RJ.
Thanks for tuning into the 6-3 podcast. I'm your host, Joel, my co-hosts, Ben and Isaiah. Episode 30 on the beautiful August 11, 2020, a day after some storms. Did you get anything down there in KZoo?
Rain for like a half hour. That's it.
Oh, that's better than nothing, I guess. But Tigers, I'm going to talk to you because you're a White Sox fan, and Tigers are playing the White Sox right now, even though it's not very pretty. Granted, they're on a 4-game win streak, beat the White Sox yesterday, when I personally think the White Sox are probably, next to the Twins, the best team in the AL Central. I don't think the Tigers keep this up forever, but I'm loving it right now. They look like a nice, chipper young squad.
Well, I think they're playing loose because they have nothing to lose. 60-game season. They don't care what's going on right now. So,
Right?
yeah, perfect example of kind of what we talked about in the MLB preview. There might be a team that kind of comes out and plays loose with nothing to lose that surprises some teams. So I'm surprised, but I'm not in a sense that I thought there were probably going to be some instances where this happened. So.
Yeah, and then in the NBA, the only story going on is that, like, there's a play-in with the 8th and 9th seed if they're within 4 games. And right now there is like I think a 4-team race. The Spurs, the Suns, the Memphis Grizzlies, and the Trailblazers are all within a half a game of each other. Mm-hmm. So only 2 teams will get to play the play-in, but the Memphis Grizzlies have been kind of like the opposite of that. They have had so much pressure in the bubble in the NBA that they have not been playing good. They're losing by 16 right now to the Celtics, even though the Celtics are a really good team. But it looks like a combination of the Spurs, Portland, or Memphis will be playing in for that play-in. And I really think I know you guys don't watch much NBA, but the Trailblazers look poised to take that 8 spot, and they could give some they can make it a series with the Lakers. I don't think they'll win, but
You had them as a sleeper, though, on your NBA preview.
I did have the Trailblazers as a sleeper, yeah, just because I know they underperformed because of injuries, and then this time off they got Nurkic back. They got a couple other guys back who were –
And Lillard's always solid. So.
And Lillard dropped 51 points last night, I think.
Lillard can win them games by himself sometimes.
So when he has a healthy team around him of just some role players and C.J. McCollum's actually hitting shots, I think they could take the Lakers to 6 or 7 games if they're really on it. But we'll see if they get to that point. I'd rather see them than any of the other teams in that 8 seed playing the Lakers first round. So
Suns are 7-0 in the bubble now too.
Suns, yeah, I think they lost once.
I thought they were 7-0, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. No, they did. They did just win today.
Yeah.
So
crazy.
Yeah, Devin Booker's been insane, Oh, let's see. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 7 in a row in the bubble.
Crazy.
Yeah, and then they have their last game against the Mavericks, and the Mavericks have looked up and down. So
yeah.
The only thing with the Suns is that they were 6 games out when this all started, so they needed all these other teams to just lose tragically, and sadly that didn't happen because Devin Booker needs some success in his life that he's just hasn't been getting his whole career.
Right.
Yeah, so in honor of episode 30, I'm going to crack open my last Baja Blast. We're going to get this bad boy on the road, and today's list is going to be the top 12 wide receivers of all time. And Ben, go ahead and take it off with who you got at 12.
All right, number 12. Number 12. Are we gonna play the thing? No, you don't have to play the thing. Don't worry about it. I'm gonna go with number 12. I'm gonna go with Isaac Bruce. Number 12.
Hey.
Main weapon on one of the main weapons for the greatest show on turf. Had a pretty insane 2002, obviously on that team. Really one of the most consistent wide receivers of all time. I mean, I think he's sort of overlooked just because that wouldn't say he's overlooked necessarily on an all-time level, but he's overlooked just because that team had a lot of weapons and he was just on good teams, really good offenses. But yeah,
he was my first favorite player in the NFL. Did you know? I mean,
Yeah.
because Madden '98, he was on the All Madden team that was like 100 overall, and him and Antonio Freeman were like the two guys to go to that year.
Yeah,
And
I mean, yeah, I actually do remember that. Like, and
Yeah.
that team had, obviously like Marshall Faulk, Torrey
Torrey
Holt was,
Holt,
was really
Orlando
good.
Pace.
Yeah, so crazy good team, obviously, but just obviously one of the better receivers of all time. Over 15,000 receiving yards, bunch of touchdowns.
Yeah.
And
And fifth all time in a single season receiving yards is 1781 in his second year. Like that's pretty crazy for a sophomore to have that record.
Yeah.
Yeah. That 120 catches, 1,780 or 81 yards, 13 touchdowns. Like that year kind of like solidifies just how good he could be.
You can't complain about durability either. 16 years in the league. He finished his last two with the 49ers.
Yep.
But definitely not really known for those, but with his career with the Rams.
Yeah, even after that greatest Sean Turf year, I mean, he still was very, very, very good. Obviously, 02 was his, insane year, but I mean.
And every year that he played more than 12 games, he had over 100 catches. And so that's just consistency. You're getting 1,000 yards from him most years of his career as long as he's not hurt. And I think he gets pretty overlooked. Like I think some people don't immediately bring him up when they talk about like their top 10, top whatever wide receivers at all. Like he should at least be an honorable mention in any top 10 list.
Yeah, and he, and that's why I put him at 12. I don't know if he's necessarily top 10. He probably deserves consideration though, for sure, just because his stats match up. I think he gets overlooked because if you think of Isaac Bruce, you don't think of any physical trait that's like this guy was, some of the guys on this list, you're going to be like, that guy was a physical freak. But Isaac, like, no, that guy was just always open. So,
I mean, he was just 6 foot tall. He never touched 200 pounds. So
it just got open. And you know what? And you can be a really good receiver in the NFL, and you'll come to, some of these guys on this list probably you'll can make that case. You can be a really good receiver in the NFL by just, consistently getting open and catching the ball. And that's what he did for his entire career. So,
Isaiah, who do you want to put at 11?
I'm going to put at 11 a guy from the 70s and 80s, James Lofton.
Ooh.
Played for the Packers most of his career. He also played for the Raiders and Buffalo. Kind of journeyed around in Philly. Another 16-year career. I had him and Isaac Bruce, I had switched around a bunch of times at 11 and 12. But yeah, James Lofton, 14,000 yards, 16-year career, 75 touchdowns, 6 seasons over 1,000 yards. And some of that was just injury concerns. He just didn't play enough full seasons to really get his numbers high enough. It looks like just looking at just on an NFL reference. Some years where he played 9 games, some 12, some 12 again. But yeah, just an incredible, like kind of that like stalwart of the 80s Packers that they needed. Like he was just around that whole decade, had a really long career and was just their solid wide receiver that no matter who else was on the team, they knew they were going to get production from him. Six seasons over 1,000 yards, and that's nothing to laugh at either. Yeah.
No. Yeah, he was good in the postseason. Looks like he had 8 postseason touchdowns.
Yeah.
8-time Pro Bowler, so really good.
Yeah. So number 10, then I'm going to put Julio Jones.
Okay.
And his real name is Quintoris. I don't want to mess it up too bad, but obviously he is one of these physical specimens. Again, he's 225 pounds, 6'3". I think he ran like a 4.4 still on a bum knee at the combine back in 2011. 31 years old and still performing at the highest level. And I have him as the only active wide receiver on this list.
Yeah. Did Larry Fitzgerald retire?
Oh, he did. No, that's right. Larry Fitzgerald's still in.
I was gonna say, better be on.
Fact check.
Yeah.
I just got snow. Holy cow.
Yeah. No, I had Julio Jones right at 10 too. We were talking about Calvin Johnson before the show started. Like very similar numbers except for touchdowns for Julio Jones, and like They both had 7 seasons over 1,000 yards. Both had 2 seasons over 1.5 or 1,500 yards. The only thing that kept him, I wish I could bump him up a little bit, and he will eventually once he plays a few more years, but just not that red zone threat he needs to be. And I know that's because teams put their best corner and then probably a safety over top on him every time that he is near that red zone just because he's so big and so physical. But yeah, that's the biggest downfall I've seen with just the offensive planning under Dan Quinn is like, even if they're double teaming him, like people like DeAndre Hopkins, Larry Fitzgerald, these other like Antonio Brown, they find ways to get into the end zone almost every game, or not almost every game, but every other game at least. Julio Jones needs to have a game plan around him that gets him the ball in the end zone within like those 15 to 10 yard from the touchdown or from a touchdown, just because I don't know how he doesn't get more looks down there. They just really don't look his way enough. But
I think the interesting thing about him, I think he's like the Adrian Peterson, but of wide receivers, just in the fact that obviously a lot of college injuries came in the NFL basically dealing with injuries. People did not expect him to stay healthy. He was like, it was between him and AJ Green on who was the best receiver in that class. And right now we're seeing AJ Green not making it very far in the last couple of years, injury with his injury concerns. Julio Jones has only had 1 year where he did not play a full season. Yeah, and I think that's impressive to say the least for a guy that people were like really worried about. Obviously, high ceiling, but very huge injury concerns.
I mean, I think to talk about the lack of touchdowns and stuff too. Like, I think I saw a comment. It was actually Julio Jones talking about it the other day, and I don't know when he talked about it, but you know, you mentioned how much he gets doubled or tripled or bracketed or whatever, and he said, they asked him, and they said, "Is there anybody in the league right now that can cover you?" And they didn't say like, double team or whatever. And he said, one-on-one, absolutely not.
Right. Yeah.
But, I never face one-on-one coverage. There's absolutely, there's never a time when I'm singled up. And I would agree with that. There's never a time, that it would be really cool to see if the Falcons could get another guy that could really dominate, on the other side of the field maybe, or a slot guy that could really make it really tough on defensive backs. So to see him matched up one-on-one more. And I think if that were to be the case, then I think you could probably see those touchdown numbers probably creep up, even though he's in his 30s now.
We saw that early on when Calvin Ridley first started making an impact too. Like he was getting the touchdowns because I remember the first 8 games, I think he still only had like 1 touchdown in his first 8 games. And I think Calvin Ridley started picking it up a little bit, and then I think he still managed to finish that season with 6 or 7. Yeah. So, I mean, that does make a difference, like you said, Ben. You got to have that really strong wide receiver on the other end.
Yeah,
to pull those numbers.
You all game long. I mean, you can't. You might get your numbers by catching the ball underneath. We saw that. I remember that year Calvin Johnson went crazy for the Lions. I mean, it eventually just came the Lions were just throwing him a bunch of slants over and over again because that's all teams were giving him. And you can do that all game long. I mean, you got to end up with 12 catches for 100 yards plus, but you're not going to get him in the end zone. We'll see. We'll see. How it progresses from here. Maybe Calvin Ridley will take some pressure off him, and we'll go from there. So,
yeah. How's me and Joel have this pretty much the same list so far. Do you have anybody that's kind of veered from your number 10 or 11, Ben?
Well, I had Julio Jones at 11.
Okay.
I had Chris Carter and Tim Brown at my 11 and 12.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think probably some of you guys still might mention them because I think they're definitely top 10 worthy, I think, in some cases. They were tough for me to stick in there. I think I wanted to get a couple old guys in there that I know were super huge for their time. So I think that's why those guys got pushed back a little bit for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I kicked those old guys out right away.
Did you?
If their picture on NFL Reference was black and white, they were gone. No, I'm just kidding. I have one guy up there who was black and white, but I did 13 and 14. I had some older guys, but okay.
All right, cool, Ben. Well, then who do you have at number 9?
So at number 9, I have Tim Brown.
Okay.
Same with me.
Yeah, 17-year career, eclipsed 1,000 yards in 9 straight years from 1993 to 2001. Pretty insane.
Yeah.
Pro Bowl 9 times, ranks top 10 in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. Just consistently one of the better receivers of all time. I think consistency is the name of the game for him. And I think that's kind of a theme throughout this. I mean, if if you're consistently racking up 1,000 yards and you're, for, 9, 10 plus years, you're probably going to end up on this list. So just a consistent player. Yeah, I mean, there's no way you can leave him off top 12, I'd say.
I think he's just, we're seeing the evolution of the wide receiver position where people really, really covet those really large receivers now. But he's just like Isaac Bruce. I think pretty much same height, 6 foot, 190. Like just not a physical specimen again, but he was athletic for, the late 80s, early 90s. He was quick. And just as a bonus, I follow him on LinkedIn. So definitely got to give him one.
Got to be on the list if you follow him on LinkedIn.
No, it is crazy. Like once he got his breakthrough after, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4. He had 5 years, but then after those first 5 years, he did not miss 1,000 yards until he was 36 years old.
Right.
All 9 of those seasons in a row having 1,000 yards, like that to me it's insane. I had him at number 9 as well, and just playing. I mean, and you kind of get it from not playing a ton in the first 5 years of his career, but playing 17 years as a wide receiver, like where every time you're touching the ball, unless you're getting in the end zone, you're getting tackled. Like,
right.
And it's just a physical position more than people think it is. But 17 years at that position is pretty crazy. But yeah, so I had him right at number 9 as well.
I don't think you see many guys nowadays. I mean, other than every once in a while you may see it, but I don't think you'll see 17-year guys that often anymore.
Larry Fitzgerald's gonna be one of the last that.
Yeah, I mean,
that you could even think could make it to 20. Like another guy that'll probably be higher on all our lists, but it's just not happening. Same with running backs. Like last week we did that list, and some guys played, 15, 16 years, but I just don't think it's gonna happen much anymore.
Hard to do. It's a physical sport. They're trying to limit as much physicality as possible, but it's still hard to do. You get beat up. So, yeah.
All right. Well, then, Isaiah, who do you have at number 8?
I have Mr. Steve Largent.
Ooh, I got him at 7, so that's a good spot.
So, 14-year career, 13,000 yards, 100 touchdowns, 8 years over 1,000 receiving yards, which is really impressive. A couple years even over 1,200, which I think like 1,000 yards is great or very, very good for wide receivers. I think like 1,200 to 1,500 above that, like that's greatness. Like that's just being great. So yeah, definitely had him really like one of the, probably the best receiver in the league during the 70s and 80s. But just an incredible wide receiver. And was just like, and it's kind of impressive. Like he was at the same team all those years. Like I like seeing that. I just like seeing a guy that's just like consistent with one team. Like, him for that team. Like you just know him with those old, I think that was when they had the purple jerseys with the Seahawks.
The old Seahawks jerseys. Yeah.
You think of, I forget their fullback's name.
Their current fullback?
No, back in those days.
Oh.
They had like a stud fullback, but you think of him and you think of Largent when you think of those purple jerseys. But yeah.
Largent considered probably one of the best Seahawks, probably the best Seahawks player of all time. I mean, Russell Wilson will probably have something to say about it eventually. But,
right. But yeah.
Sean Alexander he didn't play long enough.
But so I have him right at number 8. I think that's really deserving.
Yeah. I like
Max Strong is the fullback.
Max, but he was from the 90s and 2000s, wasn't he? He didn't play with Largent.
No, but he had that purple jersey for a couple of years.
Oh, okay. That's what you're getting at. Because I remember they had Derek Coleman, who was the death fullback for a while, too. They hung on to their fullbacks for a minute. But, so I guess number 7, then, I'm going to put Marvin Harrison. He was good before Peyton Manning even rolled around. I think he was having another guy who was the quarterback before Peyton Manning. They had bad quarterbacks before Peyton Manning, which is why Peyton Manning got drafted so early, because bad teams. But Marvin Harrison, obviously he had the record until last year with most catches in a season with 143. Michael Thomas now is 149. Mm-hmm. But Marvin Harrison, again, another guy that probably didn't play, terribly long. I think he 13 years compared to a lot of other wide receivers in his list. Didn't play 14 years. Okay.
14. 14 years.
But only missed a couple of games in that career. I think 2007 was the only year that he was hurt for a significant amount of time.
Yeah.
And then that was obviously he was starting to get the idea he should hang up cleats pretty soon. But Over 14,500 yards. And he also did rake in the touchdowns. There was from the year 99 all the way to 2006, he was pulling in 10 touchdowns or more. Again, though that's work with Peyton Manning, but they had other guys at that time too, Reggie Wayne. They just had other good co-wide receivers, and I think, like you said, with Julio Jones, need to have that other good wide receiver to kind of open up the other side. And I think Reggie Wayne was a really good number 2 to Marvin Harrison's 1 for so long.
Yeah, I had Marvin Harrison a spot higher at number 6, but besides Jerry Rice has the most 1,500-yard seasons with 3 right in the middle of his career. But, yeah, I think you think of Peyton Manning when you think of those Colts teams in the 90s and 2000s. But, and, yeah, that's a big reason for success. But Marvin Harrison is – he's very close to being a top 5 all-time wide receiver to me. He just was consistently incredible his whole career.
He's probably the first guy on this list that not that the other guys were slow by any means, especially Julio's a physical freak or whatever, but Marvin Harrison was especially when he was in the prime of his career, was a flat burner. I mean, that guy could fly. And that's what he did. He got deep. So he was really, really Peyton Manning's deep threat during all those crazy years that he had with the Colts. So it was impressive to watch. I remember those Colts, those Colts teams were, I still remember, Peyton Manning going up, changing the play 85 times at the line of scrimmage. And then there'd just be, you'd change the play to some bomb to Marvin Harrison. I still remember vividly, it happening 3 times in one game. I don't remember who they were playing. And I'm just like, what in the world is going on here? And my dad's like, yeah, he's just faster than everybody. And I was like, yeah, well, that helps. So one of the more impressive.
Not at the same level, but kind of like Tyreek Hill, just what we do about him? No, he's just fast.
Just faster than everybody.
It's and not obviously not 4.3, maybe even 4.2 speed like Tyreek Hill, but you knew when he he was just the fastest guy in the field, and he knew it too.
Yep.
All right, number 7 or 6? 6 now. All right.
6.
Ben, go ahead with 6.
Number 6, I am going to go with. This is getting nitty gritty here, but I'm actually gonna go with Larry Fitzgerald at 6.
Okay.
Obviously he's still playing, so that's just impressive in and of itself. What is he? 17,083.
Second all time.
5th all time in touchdowns now. He's got 120. 11-time Pro Bowler. The dude does not drop anything.
No.
Led the NFL in catches twice, has 9 seasons over 1,000 yards, led the league in touchdowns twice. Just really just kind of a good dude. Really just an awesome player. Played on some good teams, don't get me wrong, but really just consistent. Again, just consistency. I wouldn't consider him a physical freak by any means, but it's not like he has poor physical tools, but he's just solid, just all around solid, and is just always open. Kind of in line with most of the receivers I've picked on this list to this point.
Right.
Yeah.
I think consistent, and they plays a long time, and just gets open. So
I was gonna say, going into his 17th year, he has only missed 5 games with the Cardinals. That's durability. I think out of all these receivers on this list and playing this long, durability has never been a concern with Larry Fitzgerald. Yeah. He's always on the field. He's always going to make a difference. And, again, not like he's not a fast wide receiver. He's definitely not known to be fast. But he is 6'3", 220 pounds, and that's a good size. That's why he's able to win physical battles. If it comes down to one-on-one, he'll make that catch. But like you said, he's able to make catches, not drop despite taking double coverage, especially since Anquan Bolden left.
Well, I think some of his better years happened after he started playing more in the slot, and he's just a technician. He just knows how to get open against
perfect route runner. He's flawless route runner.
Incredible route runner. I think we'll talk about it when we get to probably Jerry Rice, but Jerry Rice-esque as far as route running. Just incredible, technique, and just is always open, and that's the name of the game. Yeah, it's great to be, physically gifted, and that helps. And, that's why if he was physically gifted, incredible freak of nature, yeah, he'd probably be, he might be number one.
I think he could pass Jerry Rice. I mean,
Yeah.
those numbers are obviously untouchable. I mean, we see Fitzgerald playing forever, and I still don't think he's ever going to get there. But
Right.
like that's a topic for another couple of turns, obviously. But Larry Fitzgerald's a great spot. Definitely worth that 5 or 6 spot, I think, on a lot of lists.
Yeah.
Yep.
For sure. I had him right at number 5, so I definitely agree with everything you're saying. 9 seasons over 1,000 yards. That's third out of all the everybody on my list. It's incredible. I have number 5.
Yep.
All right, we did skip over one guy on my list, Chris Carter, but I am gonna go with, because I don't want to put Chris Carter above Larry Fitzgerald, but I'm gonna go with Terrell Owens. Okay. Third all time in touchdowns with 152, almost 16,000 yards, 9 seasons over 1,000 yards. Little controversy, heard he's just not a good locker room guy. He moved around a lot in his career, couldn't really find a home except for San Francisco the first part of his career, but the numbers really don't lie. 16,000 yards, 15 years, 152 touchdowns, like I said. Definitely deserving of getting in the Hall of Fame so recently. I understand some of his maybe gripes with that process. Terrell Owens, and he just has so many moments, like the popcorn in the face when he played for Dallas, just the taunting he used to do when he was running for a touchdown. I think I have him at number 4, but I think number 5 is a really good spot for him. So, I'm going to have T.O. right now.
Beast. Dude was a physical beast. He was fast. He was big. He was, just a monster.
Yeah.
Lots of off-field or locker room issues, and maybe that I think people look into that too much. Like, wide receivers are typically diva. That's just kind of comes with the territory. Not everybody, I shouldn't say everybody is, but that's Fitzgerald, perfect example. Not at all that way. But, that's just kind of comes with the territory sometimes with really good receivers. And it's I don't think you can knock him off, down on a list because of that by any means, because all the dude did on the field was produce. The dude's numbers were insane. So.
And it I think something that speaks to how good he was and how just kind of talented he was he played for mostly Dallas, Philly, and San Francisco, and he had over 1,000 yards for all those teams. He was productive for all of those teams. He had seasons for all those teams with over 16 yards per catch. He moved around a lot because he couldn't find a home because he might have been a jerk, but it didn't matter. It didn't seem to matter much of what system he was in. He was successful. Obviously, Buffalo and Cincinnati, even when he was 36 and 37, 830 yards and 983 yards. It seems like he could have caught 1,000 yards per season in almost any offense in the NFL in the 2000s. So, just incredible career.
Yeah. All right. Well, at number 4, I think I'm going to put an old guy that maybe obviously none of us have really watched other than old highlight films. I'm going to put Don Hutson here. He played for 11 years with the Green Bay Packers when they called the wide receiver position the left end, when they used to have split ends and everything else. He played pretty much every single game for the Packers at that time. And then still in 1942 racked up 17 receiving touchdowns in 1 year, which in a completely unorganized offensive system back in the 40s when they were still learning the game. That says a lot.
Thing.
Yeah, he put up really good numbers, and obviously there was no quarterback to throw at him. Everyone thinks of the Packers obviously when you think of old time football, and still even today. But he didn't have a quarterback back then. We think of the first real quarterback the Packers really ever had was Bart Starr in the 60s. So he had a bunch of nobodies throwing to him in the 40s, and still put up really good numbers.
Yeah.
He's probably the best receiver of his era, so I feel like he's probably deserving of being on the list. Probably in the top 5.
Yeah.
Obviously, different day and age, different kind of football back then. But if you're, what was it? What did you say? 17 touchdowns in that year, right?
In 1942, during World War II, when people really needed wide receiving threats to get them through the dark times.
Caught some bombs.
Yeah, caught some literal bombs. Called him Hiroshima.
Yeah, and like he had a season with 1,200 yards. Like that was unheard of not only during his time, but for decades after his time.
Yes.
Like I'm not gonna do the research necessary, but I can't imagine how many 1,200 plus yard seasons there were around him, within the 20 years after him, really till the 60s. Like,
well, they didn't play full 16 season games back then either. They were playing 11 or 14 season games at that time. So those are crazy numbers. He was averaging like 112 yards a season that year. I mean, a game. That again for that day and age, that's wild.
1,200 yards is, I mean, right now it's like, yeah, that guy had a great year now. Like, so it's like, I mean, if you're doing that in the 30s or 40s, that's insane.
With like 3 less games, completely unorganized offensive systems, not good quarterbacks. There's a lot to be said there.
Yeah, make it like if it's 1,200 yards is impressive now. Do that with Nathan Peterman as your quarterback.
Yep.
And playing 11 games, like
it may be a coronavirus shortened season. Yeah,
like a lockout year. Like, but then do it in 1940, and I know it's so hard to tell because like we talked about this with quarterbacks, like how many receiving yards would Don Hudson get today? But really, you can't say. He took advantage of the time he was at. He was the best wide receiver in the time he was at. So yeah, I had him up right off my top 10, but I definitely should have put more respect on him because I just really didn't think of the era he played in and do much research into it. But yeah, he definitely is deserving of top 10, top 5 honors.
I also felt like it was the other 3 guys that I still have aren't deserving of 4 or later. So I think I wanted to make sure the top 3 stayed intact.
Yeah.
So, all right, Ben, you're going to go with 3.
Number 3. I'm going to go with Calvin Johnson at number 3.
Yep, that's me too.
Yeah. He might be the most physically freaky receiver on this list. He's got competition with the guys that's my number 2. The guy that's my number 2. But yeah, we talked about this a little bit with Barry Sanders, and I guess this is a Lions thing, but he retired early at age 30. He only played 9 years in the league, so it's kind of insane that he's in the top 3 here, and he only played 9 years. But he did most dominant receiver in the league during his time, maybe the most dominant to ever play the game. Single season receiving record, yards record, 1,964 yards in 07, 7-time Pro Bowler, just obviously best receiver in Lions history. And you could probably have an argument that, I mean, some people might put him number 1. I mean, he's the best. With all the dominant receiving performances we see now, like, Michael Thomas last year and, some of these insane receiving, he was still more dominant than those guys. I mean, when he was playing, still just, we talk about, Julio Jones getting double and triple teamed, and that's kind of keeping him out of the end zone. Calvin Johnson didn't matter. You could put all 11 guys on him and he probably would have came down with some touchdowns. That guy was incredible.
Spectacular catch rating of 99.
Yeah, just insane. You could not guard the guy. Could not guard him. And guys nowadays talk about how you can't guard me, whatever. No, you literally could not guard Calvin Johnson. Yeah. And it's it's unfortunate that he retired early. Some of it due to injury, some of it just due to he just was done playing football, and that's
for the line. He wanted to smoke medical marijuana. That was another thing. There's a lot of athletes that can't.
Maybe that helped him. Who knows?
I know. Yeah.
Really helped him with his pain because we talked about.
He took some shots, man. People were going up at his legs while he was going up for the ball, and he came down hard.
Yeah.
There was a lot of awful landings where I'd be like, "Oh crap!" Like when I watched those.
And the other thing, I remember doing that because it's like that guy can't get hurt because if he gets hurt, then there's nothing to watch. The Lions suck.
Basically, have Sean McDonald and Chris Durham. That's who you have playing at that point.
Joseph Ford,
Mike Furry, and Roy Williams.
Mike Furry. But just must-watch TV. Just literally for me, being a Lions fan and then, being able to grow up, at the time that he was playing and, growing up watching football and stuff, that was just so fun to watch and the most incredible receiver I've ever seen play. So
yeah.
Well, yeah, and just incredibly durable, even though only playing 9 years. Like he was kind of like Matthew Stafford when he broke his back last year and still wanted to play. Like Calvin Johnson just wanted to play. Like even though it was for the Lions, even though they sucked, like he always just wanted to play football. Like he wanted to take.
There would be weeks where he was day to day, and he would still be like, "All right, I'll suck it up. I'll take a painkiller or whatever this game." And
I'll take a shot and just get me in. And I mean, almost eclipsing 2,000 yards in one season is insane.
Yeah.
And having 16 yards per reception as his career numbers, 16 yards per reception. That's ridiculous.
The other thing that's kind of cool about him is he went to college in Georgia Tech.
What's the triple option?
Yeah, the Georgia Tech was running triple option at the time. So I mean, he still put up some. If you look at it, I mean, he had some kind of crazy stuff that happened in college too, where he would still flash the talent, obviously. But they're running triple option. He's not even able to put up to show what he was able to do in the NFL in college. So it's like he kind of, I wouldn't say he came out of nowhere because everybody knew how good he was and how much of a physical freak he was. But it's like, I mean, you didn't even get to see, the insane ability in college because of the offense he played in. And then, then he bursts on the scene in the NFL and it's like, holy crap, this guy is insane. So really cool.
Yeah, no, he had a really good last year in college, but other than that, like really didn't get much time to shine in that offense. But
that was not a good draft class, 2007. Though. I mean, at least definitely for quarterbacks, Jamarcus Russell went ahead of him, and they did have Adrian Peterson, so that still worked out. But
yeah. I know it's kind of like that Barry Sanders conversation we had last week with like having him at number 1, even though he played a shorter career. Like Calvin Johnson really had the best short career of any wide receiver, really. Like there's a couple guys on our list with like 9, 11, 10-year careers, but they're kind of around that 10, 12 spot, at least for me, like some of these guys. But yeah, and you can almost look at it. It's not as much of a sure thing of like, if he played more years, he would have these records because Jerry Rice's numbers are ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always wish, like one of my biggest what ifs for the Lions is what if Calvin Johnson just played 3 more years, like just get him to eclipse 15,000 yards and 100 touchdowns. And like, I think he's like obviously battling more, but like he's number 2 all time for me for like easily at that point.
I thought about putting that. I really knocked back and forth with these top 3. I mean, I even considered putting Calvin Johnson for a second there at number 1. I felt like
me too.
I'm like, calm the homer down. I don't know quite.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, all right, I can't be that big of a homer, but at the same time, I'm like, that guy might have been talent-wise, he might be number 1.
I mean, we watched him every week. We did get the up close and personal with Calvin Johnson. Like I went and saw Lions games in person with Calvin Johnson. I watched him every single Sunday on TV. Like we saw a true specimen. No wide receiver is going to be able to run a 4.35, be the same size that he is, make the spectacular catches and catches in traffic that he did. Downfield speed is nuts. There is a lot of things that if you really just sat and thought about talent alone and just how he used his body to make every catch, and we saw that every single week. That's like from that perspective, a lot of people would be like, yeah, inclination to put Calvin Johnson in one of the greatest of all time. And I think, trying to put that all aside and stuff and try to consider some of the other greats of all time, he's definitely deserving of top 3, but I don't blame anyone that could put him higher than that.
Yeah, and quote-unquote football experts, people have, studied all this stuff and watched all these guys. Some of those guys even say, hey, he's the best we've ever seen.
Yeah.
But I don't think you can put him at number 1 just because he only played 9 years.
I think that's the biggest knock on him for sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just think he's got to be in your top 5. Like
yeah,
like and I'm not really mad at any position in that top 5. Maybe not number 1, but if you have him 2 through 5, like I don't mind. I saw a list earlier today from I think Bleacher Report that had him at number 10, and I was just like no, like, and they cited like his longevity and stuff for it, and I was just like, yeah, but like
you can't suck that much off of him for 9 years still of seeing that sample. 9 years is still a sample size. It's not like
they had
3 years.
They had Don Hudson number 2. So,
it's not like Chris Borland in the NFL. Obviously, he was a good linebacker for 2 years and then retired. But you can't. That's the same. 9 years is still a sample size to see the difference that he made on a really crappy team.
Well, and again, I physically the most gifted receiver we've ever seen. I mean, there's only one other guy that even comes close, and he's probably number 2 or number 1 on this list here, depending on, probably number 2 here in a minute. And Calvin Johnson was still probably more physically gifted than he is. So, it's just, I don't know. Like, yeah, it's a shame. I mean, imagine if he had played 15 years. If he had played even, like Isaiah, you were saying, if he only played 3 more years and, just eclipse those numbers, I think I'd probably put him number 1.
Yeah.
Without even, take the homer out of it, he's probably still – he might be number 1. I mean, obviously Jerry Rice's numbers are going to never be eclipsed, but,
Jerry Rice also played for like 100 years. I mean,
yeah,
I think literally he played for 20 years or something.
He had like 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks. There's other – we'll talk about that. That's, we'll see that in a second. But it's just like, there's other things that cause Jerry Rice to be that good. And obviously Jerry Rice is good. But I think Calvin Johnson plays 2, 3, maybe 4 more years. I think I'd probably put him at number 1 if he kept up the pace. So
I can get behind that.
Yeah, and just I think like the last thing we can say about Calvin Johnson, but like his talent is generationally transcendental. Like he could have played. I mean, obviously he could have played in like the 40s and 60s and stuff, but like I feel like in 40 years, you can throw Calvin Johnson on a team and he'd be a dominant force. Like in 40 years, when the game develops however it does and whatever happens, like he had the speed, he had the physicality, he had the route running, he had the catch in traffic, the spec catch, whatever Madden ratings you want to give him, like he's got
his release. I mean, he was just route running. Everything was solid.
Yeah, because like you can look at a guy like Marvin Harrison, like we were talking about earlier, just quicker than most people on the field. But like today, you have people like John Ross, Tyreek Hill, McCall Hardman, like
Rashad Perriman. Those guys don't pan out.
Yeah, but these guys who Marvin Harrison wouldn't have been the fastest receiver now. And you have like these other guys who wouldn't have been the best route runner today, wouldn't have been the fastest guy, like Randy Moss even, who we'll get to, like wouldn't have been the fastest today and had these things like they did when they played like a couple of decades ago for some of them. But maybe not Randy Moss. I feel like he's faster.
Yeah, he's pretty fast.
But like I just feel like Calvin Johnson, like I said, in 40 years we'll still say like, oh, if Calvin Johnson was on their team, that'd be incredible. Like he's just a prototype.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's your created
Sorry. Take my Randy Moss takeaway. He raced horses when he was a child. Like, it's okay.
He was super fast. I mean, those combine 40 times though in like 1998, those weren't super accurate. Combine numbers weren't super accurate until they developed the technology to wear around at the finish line, and then that was like 2004 2003, 2004 when that started. So,
all right, let's get to number 2.
Yeah, let's have you do 2. That was a really long 3.
I mean, we're a little bit homer.
We love Calvin, that's for sure.
Let's get him on the podcast.
All right, I will. Hit him up on LinkedIn. Okay, go for it. Number 2.
Me?
Yeah, you're up.
Oh, I just switched it. It was a game time decision as we were talking about Calvin Johnson. So I am going to put Jerry Rice at number 2.
Okay.
I mean, yes, record books, like, but I don't know. Like, I just think, like we were saying, like, I don't want to take it away from him too much, but he had 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks. He played for 20 years. So these overall numbers, at least, like having 200 touchdowns, 23,000 yards, like, yeah, he played 4 more years than anybody else on my list. Like, he's going to have better numbers than them. I just think the one guy we've left off, which we just mentioned a second ago at being very fast, if I could pick any wide receiver to be on my team, it'd probably be him. Like, it'd probably be Randy Moss. So I have to go with Jerry Rice at number 2. Controversy.
Yeah, you're gonna have to make me defend Randy Moss for number 1. That's gonna have to happen here. Yeah. I'll try.
I can see it. I can see it, and like, so Jerry. The difference with Randy Moss and like the difference, the difference between those two are the physical traits again. Like Jerry Rice, by no means is like not physically gifted, but I think Isaiah and I talked about a little bit before the show. What made Jerry Rice so special is obviously his longevity. He had some really good quarterbacks, playing some great teams. That helps. But the dude's work ethic was like unmatched, like from NFL standards. I mean, it was like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant level work ethic, but just in the NFL. I mean, just like legendary level of just like, I mean, just incredibly hard worker, worked at his craft. And that's what made him so good. So that's why he's such a cool story. Not a physical freak, not slow, but not fast, just incredibly
not tall,
hard
but
worker.
not short. I mean, yeah, he was 6'2".
Kind of just in between on every level, and just made himself super, super special. And then obviously played forever. So he played for a million years. That helps.
4.7.
But I can see, I mean, at the same time, the difference. Randy Moss, physical freak, straight up dominated a couple seasons, in 2007, just complete dominating receiver. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, I didn't watch, Jerry Rice really that much until like the tail end.
I know we
of
got
his
to
career.
watch mostly at the tail end when he was playing with like the Seahawks and the Broncos and the Raiders.
Right. We really didn't get to
Tom
see.
Brady?
Yeah, a little bit with Tom Brady. Yeah. Well, not Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice didn't.
Oh, I thought we were talking about.
No,
Randy
we're still on
Moss,
Jerry Rice for number 2, buddy.
Yeah.
I got to take Randy Moss.
the Randy Moss or the Jerry Rice dominance necessarily with the 49ers. So maybe that's partly, tainting this, but I can see the argument for Randy Moss at 1. Randy Moss still played a long time. The only issue with that argument of putting, Rice at 2 is those stats are just absurd. So
I know,
it's
and
hard.
like probably in 5 minutes I'll change my mind, and
Well,
that's
I'll
fine,
see if
but-
I can convince you otherwise.
Go ahead.
With all on these top 3, I eventually settled with Calvin at number 3 just because I think you kind of have to, just because he just did not play long enough. But from a physical standpoint, 1 and 2 are Calvin Johnson, Randy Moss.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tough.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't really like Jerry Rice as a person.
Well, I mean, you made the one valid point you can make, though, and I don't know if you feel the same way than too, Ben, but I agree with Isaiah. If I had to choose between, Randy Moss or Jerry Rice to put on my team, I'm going to choose the physical specimen that is Randy Moss. He was big and fast, and Jerry Rice was. I mean, he was 6'2". He was a really good route runner, great work ethic, but he ran a 4.7. Like, that's not anything fast. In fact, that's really slow. If a wide receiver runs 4.7, they're probably dropping to the 4th round. Like, that's just the way it is. I mean, he went to Mississippi Valley State and played for the Demon Deacons. Like, he didn't. It's not a big college. He had a lot to prove when he came to the NFL that he could play on a big professional level like that, and he showed up. But
I just think like if you, gosh, I don't know. Like and one of the other things that made me switch is like if you took Randy Moss and put him on those San Francisco 49er teams with or Joe Montana and Steve.
I mean, we saw what he did when he was with Tom Brady and the
Right.
really undefeated New England Patriots at the time. Like, he was
in his
one of the
30s.
best. Yeah, he was one of the best wide receivers. That was one of the best receiving seasons of any player.
I mean,
So you could make
that's
that argument.
arguably the best receiving.
But Dante Culpepper was a good quarterback for about 4 or 5 years. And then on top of that, he still had to compete for touches with Chris Carter for a little while. And then eventually Nate Burleson before he ended up, leaving. But
So, yeah, I don't know. If you give Randy Moss a 20-year career playing for the quarterbacks that Jerry Rice played for,
I think he could break those records.
he breaks 25,000 yards probably. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Durability was not
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a huge issue for him until his last 2 years, and obviously that's when he knew to hang up the cleats. He wasn't even – I think he had collected like 750 yards in his last 2 years, played for 4 teams in his last 2 years. There's that.
He did have a little bit of a burnout at the end, for sure.
A lot of receivers
I do agree with you though, Joel. I mean, I agree. Like, if you're gonna pick between Jerry Rice and Randy Moss, I'm picking Calvin Johnson.
Yeah.
Well, it's the
But
same,
no, if
same
you are-
philosophy. Calvin Johnson and Randy Moss are similar in the fact that they're large players that were physical
Fast.
specimens, super fast,
Catch whatever
made
you throw at him.
crazy catches. There's literally an X Factor Moss named after Randy Moss.
And yeah, it's
Well,
cheap.
but if you're picking between the two though, but if you're picking between Randy Moss and Calvin Johnson, that's actually tough. Like, that, I don't know who I'd pick. I might pick Randy Moss really if I thought about it. I mean, just because those guys. I mean, you're right. I don't think I mean, if you want a game breaker, a guy that's going to put fear in the defense as soon as he walks onto the field, in his prime, Randy Moss might be that guy who, I mean, you make one misstep as a defensive back and it's a touchdown. I mean, it's gone. He's gone. I mean, he's just gone. So,
I mean, you're going to make us talk our way out to Jerry Rice to number 3, I think. You want to make an argument that Don Hudson's above Jerry Rice too? Let's go.
No, can't do that. You know I can't do that.
No,
the lines where the buck stops at 3.
I think if anything, this shows like, I don't know, at least in my mind, maybe Randy Moss and Jerry Rice are like 1A and 1B. I know that's kind of a cheap way out, but like the numbers and the work ethic and like the history.
It's the evolution of the game. It's the evolution of the game at the same time. Yeah. The transition with the baton, basically the baton pass from Jerry Rice to Randy Moss as being the upper echelon receivers. We're seeing that back in like the 80s and 90s, early 2000s, they still wanted those guys that were running good routes, able to create separation just on the smoothness of their routes. And that's why Jerry Rice was so profitable in his NFL career. But like then eventually size began to matter quite a bit. And you start seeing these better receivers out of college that are 6'3" and up. And
I think it's just, if you go 1A, 1B, you know, the caveat is, however you want to put it, they're just different players.
Yeah.
They're just different players. They got it done in a different way, but they both got it done at an incredibly high level, and you can't really go wrong with either one. But like you said, if I'm picking one guy, I'm probably picking Moss. If I'm picking one guy to be on my team. But if I'm picking one's career, from a whole career standpoint, then you probably got to go with Jerry Rice. So It's tough. It's really tough.
Yeah. That was a good final discussion for sure to finish off and round out this top 12 wide receivers of all time. Maybe we'll shrink the list down to 10 for tight ends.
Yeah, we really don't need 12.
Well, tight ends might be. You might be.
Tony Gonzalez and Rob
Shannon Sharp is in there. I mean, yeah.
How about we could argue like the top 5, and we could have like a real discussion like this.
Yeah, we could do that. I like that. Yeah. I can get behind that.
Aaron Hernandez. I mean.
Oh wow, that a too soon. But no, I would definitely like to pick your guys' brains on this week's discussion debate. Do professional athletes deserve the salaries and the paychecks that they receive each and every week?
Yeah.
I guess if I did, I think there's like macro and there's micro basically. I think at the macro level, we probably do value athletes a little bit too much as a society. And I think obviously we're the ones that give them their paychecks. Obviously the money goes to the owners. The owners can afford to pay their GMs, their internal workers, and the professional athletes of rosters up to 53 people on a football squad and plus a practice squad. So I think because we fork out $150 plus every game to attend, and the money and the revenue that they bring in just by televising their games, sports is a huge thing, especially in America where, we're paying these guys copious amounts of dollars to watch their games. And I think, these guys get to play kids games while teachers make $20,000-$30,000 a year, or military people make $50,000-$60,000 a year. What the age-old argument of why did those guys make so much more? Well, for one thing, the government funds those people, whereas sports fans fund their crazy fandom of sports to these athletes. It's kind of demand.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Obviously, then within that, though, the work ethic that these guys put in to be the best, I mean, you got to start back when they're in middle school and high school playing rocket football even. Like, they have to get noticed first by a college recruiter to prove that they're good enough to play, to get a scholarship to play at that level. And then if they're good enough to get noticed by a scout to become drafted to a major league team, then they get signed to a minimum rookie contract, which is still pretty good money, but it's not obscene. And then they have 2 to 3 seasons to prove if they're good enough to get re-signed to a veteran contract. And then at that point, after 20 years or so of training to perfect their athletic ability and their skills, starting when they're like 6 to 8 years old, then they're one of the few elite competitors to earn the insane salaries in question. So if I had to make just a yes or no answer right now, I think yes, they do deserve it. What they give up to what they put themselves through in certain things, yeah, I think they do deserve. I think they deserve that money.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a difficult question because I think yes, inherently they do deserve it just because, I mean, when you have the NBA made almost $9 billion in 2018, and without coronavirus would have eclipsed 9 billion this year.
Mm-hmm.
So in an industry that gets $9 billion, yeah, I want the players to make a good chunk of that. Like I want a guy making 40 million. I want a guy making 30 plus. Like they deserve it because I mean, you just don't have a league without players. And yeah, you can get rid of some and pipe some in. No one player is bigger than a single league. But it just it makes that much money. So why shouldn't they get the money of it? Like, why do you just want it to go to the owners and the like GMs?
The rich get richer. Yeah.
But then again, like Jerry Rice deserves all the money he gets from the value of the Cowboys because he's a great businessman and he bought the team when he should have, and he runs that organization well. And it's just a question of like capitalism. I mean, if your business makes this much X amount of money, you get to pay your employees this X amount of money, and that's what they deserve because that's what their industry's for. I mean, Jeff Bezos has so much money because the companies he's invested in and the things he's done in his life are worth that much money. Like he doesn't just get money, cash in his pocket for existing. It's because Amazon stock hasn't gone down ever.
Yeah.
Like it just keeps going up and up and up. So his net worth keeps going up and up and up. So you can say like, oh, no one person should be worth hundreds of billions of dollars, but he owns the biggest company in the world or one of them. Like, yeah, so he should be worth that much because that's how much they make. So I think with athletes, like, yeah, you can talk about like discrepancy in pay. Like you get these guys on minimum contracts that are making like not a ton of money in certain leagues, like minor leagues. And then you have like the best of the best making, I mean, Patrick Mahomes making $500 million. Like, so there's a lot of discrepancy in those ways. And I think salary cap helps with that, obviously, to keep things in check a little bit. But yeah, and I think like they get that money from endorsements too, because like Michael Jordan makes money from endorsements and everything because that's how many shoes he sells.
John Madden still makes money from endorsements from a video game that he's not even part of
because it sells so much. And like, yeah, so if anybody's to blame, if you don't think athletes deserve their salary, it's us because we're giving the money to them. We're paying for jerseys, we're paying for games, we're paying for subscriptions to ESPN Plus and TV deals and everything. And we're like, that's where these leagues get the most of, or a lot of their money is TV deals and sponsorships with ESPN or TNT or whatever it might be. But that's because we're watching. That's because the Super Bowl is the most viewed TV event every single year. And commercials for it cost millions of dollars per 30 seconds because we are all watching it. And so, like, it's absurd. The numbers are ridiculous. And I don't think, like, I mean, there's, like, a religious aspect of me of, like, I don't think any one man should have that much money, but it's not like they don't deserve it. It's not like they haven't earned it and put in the work for it, at least a lot of them. And if they don't put in the work for it and they don't put in the work ethic for it, it eventually shows.
Yeah, they don't make the team. They played, like I said, for 2 to 3 years. There's a lot of players that work hard even for those 2 or 3 years at that professional level, and they still can't make that cut. And they still come back with maybe a $500,000 in that span of time. It's just, which you can't complain about $500,000 in 3 years still, but that's they don't all get there. They don't all make it. There's just a few special stars.
So my take is kind of going along with yours. I think like the discrepancy in pay is something that's probably a bit of a concern. I look at it from a baseball perspective. Like minor league players are paid dirt essentially, compared to major league players, which no, should they be paid as much as major league players? No. I mean, you know how hard it is to make it to major leagues. Like it's incredibly hard to make it there. So there should be, they should be rewarded financially to make it there, to an extent. But, if minor league players are struggling to, are struggling to make ends meet, that's probably an issue that probably should be addressed. However, I don't think you both have kind of gone into, like, we are putting value in sports to this level, right? I mean, we're on a podcast talking about sports on a Tuesday night in the middle of August during a global pandemic. We're still finding a way to talk about sports, which is great, and we do love it, and that's why we're doing it. That's awesome. But we're putting value in these players, ability to play a game, to play a kid's game, really, and that's cool to me. And that's cool to millions of other people. So that's why I don't like when people just say, oh, they don't deserve that or whatever. I mean, if you take issue with, an individual player's contract, like a lot of people take issue with how much the Chiefs are paying Mahomes, great, that's fine. But like, I don't like it when people come out and say, oh, players in general shouldn't be paid this as much as they are. You know what? I mean, that's just like you talk about. That's capitalism, man. Like, that's the market has put value in their skill, and they're just taking advantage of it. And it's the same thing as, owners have employees. Their employees are, these players. And, if they're able to pay these players as much as they are right now, then, good for them. They can do that. And that's just kind of where we're at in society. And, if people take issue with players making as much money as they do, regardless of sport, then really what their issue should be is that society is putting this much value in sports, because that's where these salaries come from. It has nothing to do with, the fact that, these players shouldn't or should not. It's just how much value we're putting into sports as a society. So if there's an issue with how much players are being played, then maybe you should look at society as a whole if you have an issue with it. Right. I love it personally. It's kind of crazy to look at. There's obviously like the inflation standpoint, or how much sports has grown standpoint, because I think what was it? Al Kaline was like the first player to ever make $100,000. And that was a good amount of time ago, but it really wasn't that long ago if you think about it. And that, it was absurd to think, $100,000. So like, people took issue with it then. So this has been an age-old, topic. People had a problem that Al Kaline was making that much money. So, back then. So it's not like this is a new topic necessarily. It's just like magnified now because the dollars amounts have gotten so insane. But if they're able to make that much money, to be paid that much money, and it's not, owners are willing to do it, then, I mean, it's the same as like, if I got a raise, like if I were to get a raise at my job, it's because, my boss or whoever's paying me finds value in what I'm doing and, is able to. So it's the same thing. It's just people don't look at it that way because they're playing a game for their job. So.
Yeah, well, and like, Joel's trying to look it up, but I was trying to look up like how many jobs does the NFL produce that aren't like players, and maybe in coaching staff. Like you got your ticket sales people, your revenue people, your
approximately that.
Yeah.
Anywhere between probably 6,500 to 8,500 internal employees that are even at the executive level, or even, and then that's not including the specific guy that's working concessions.
Yeah. So you like in Detroit, we just got the new Little Caesars Arena, and it created hundreds of jobs, maybe even thousands. And it's this cyclical thing of industry, because like we see it with the COVID and the pandemic thing, like when sports stopped and halted, like all these other industries felt that. If it was just sports that ended, every other industry would have felt that. Restaurants, hotels, travel, airplane, like all these other places feel that and feel that need. And like, it's not like, oh, the NBA makes $8 billion and they just hide it all for themselves. Like, no, it goes to hundreds of thousands of people and industries all over the place. And so, yeah, it makes sense. Like, it does feed off itself. Like it's the American part of capitalism. Like, in my mind, the good side of it, like everything feeds off each other. There's no like, sports don't exist in a vacuum where we don't need all these other things to go with it. Like when you get 20,000 people into a city for a basketball or baseball game on a day, like those people all need to stay somewhere. They need to do this. They need to eat. They need to do all these other things, and it drives this business. And yeah, like pay discrepancy, like I understand it with especially development leagues. Like I think, like I don't know, I like development leagues. Like I think I would have loved like the XFL or the AAF to like actually succeed, and the NFL to take ownership into it, just to get some of those. Excuse me, like a guy brought up in the minors. Like it's so much fun. And maybe it's just because we're in West Michigan, but like you see this guy who was drafted by the Tigers and played for the Mud Hens and then the Whitecaps, and now he's finally making on the roster and contributing on a daily basis. Like I love seeing that. And I want to go to a Whitecaps game to see that and to see these guys who next season could be on the Tigers roster.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you, Ben, and Isaiah also. You need to take better care of the minor league systems. I think the developmental leagues. I think it sounds socialist to me to say it, but spread the wealth a little bit to maybe some of your farm system players. There's no reason that guys that have already made it past like the Gulf Coast leagues and stuff, like the GCL and the ECL leagues and stuff, once you get to like single A or even double A or triple A, once you get to at least those levels, you shouldn't have to go out of your way to get a part-time job. And I know at least maybe triple A doesn't have to get a part-time job from what I've seen in the average salary there, but double A and single A, you're still looking at guys that have to take another job because they're only making 20, 30,000 a year, if that.
Yeah. And if they're doing, I've just being around baseball, like I understand some of that. And like, you obviously like your first round picks who are in double A, their signing bonuses are millions of dollars just for putting pen to paper. So like, they don't have to worry about that, but it's your guys that are like, okay, there are minor league journeymen who made a career of baseball, but they may have been up and down in the minor leagues for 8 years. They're not really making a whole lot of money. I mean, unless they were a first round pick at some point and they just haven't broke through, they're not really making that much money, and there's so many, and this is just baseball because I think it's so prevalent in baseball, and, the NFL doesn't have a development league. I mean, college football is their development league, and the NBA, the G League is kind of, it's starting to become more of a thing, and they're doing this, where they're going to let, high school players get in, they're doing that type of stuff. So that's changing a little bit. But, it's so prevalent in baseball to where, these guys just don't make very much money. And it's just sad to see because it's like, they're not that far off from where, they might just be just waiting for that opportunity. My college coach, he played in the 80s and 90s, but he never broke through to the big leagues. But he got all the way up to AAA with the White Sox and played a few years in AAA and had some good seasons. And he almost broke through, almost had a great a couple opportunities to have a cup of coffee in the big leagues, and just never quite got there. And he talked about it in different day and age in the 80s and 90s, where pay even in the major leagues wasn't what it is now. But it's just like, if he'd broke through, who knows what it could have came, as far as just a financial payday for his family or whatever. So it's crazy to hear those stories. And yeah, I agree. If you could think, that would be the one thing I would change, with like how the money, I guess, is laid out.
Because they're still raking in billions every year. You've got to think that how much $1 billion is compared to $1 million, that you could at least spread even a little bit of that extra money to. They get plenty of endorsements. They get plenty of like TV ratings, radio ratings, and then on top of that,
I think players are starting to kind of do that. I know some players have talked about, especially with COVID and stuff, with minor league players getting paid next to nothing now because there is no minor league season. They're just getting kind of like a stipend, for what they would get now. But they, there's some major league players that have spoken out and said, hey, we will give X amount of money to minor league players in our organization or whatever, which is great to see. But I think now it's got to be on the the major league teams to try to figure that out. And, there's talks of restructuring how the minor leagues are, and we'll see, what that does or whatever. But it's just, that would be the one thing I would change. But to answer the question, I guess, because this kind of went around on a tangent.
Tangents are good for discussion topics. I'm not going to deny that.
Good. To answer the question, though, I would say, I think, just because of how much value we put in sports, I don't think you can say that there's, we don't, or these players don't deserve their salaries, regardless of sport. I just think it's just we put the value in it, and it's just like any other job. If you put value in the some person's ability and skill, then yeah, you can pay them whatever you decide. I mean, it's up to the owners really and society.
Yeah, and I think like one thing that I love, I mean, you love seeing like, especially in the like NBA and NFL, you see it a ton and MLB. Like, how many stories do you know of a guy who grew up with next to nothing, raised by a single parent or even his grandparents, and then gets drafted and then like literally like after he gets the phone call saying he's drafted, calls whoever raised him and says, "You quit your job." Like, there was a Randy Moss interview I listened to.
Not Jameis Winston.
There's a Randy Moss interview I listened to, speaking of him, a couple weeks ago, and he said like halfway through his senior season, or maybe it was his junior season or second to last season before he was drafted, he called his mom and was like, "Quit your job." Like, or when I get drafted, like, I'm getting drafted, you're going to quit your job and you're never going to work a day in your life. And he said in the interview, she hasn't worked a day in her life since. Like I love seeing that. Like,
That's
I
awesome.
love seeing that. And I love seeing like these, even if it's a draft day bust, they get this couple $1 million signing bonus and have at least a small, decent contract for a few years. And like that's incredible to see. So I love that there's so much money in that industry so that they can do that. That it isn't like, oh, you got drafted, you're a first round pick, but you still have to work 10 years to make like a full salary. And then another thing, like, you're talking about pay discrepancy with like development leagues. I will say though, like, I know there's a big, huge conversation around like female leagues of things and like all these like female sports not getting paid as much, but I mean, a lot of it is driven by how much it makes. Like, the WNBA makes $60 million a year and the NBA makes almost $8 billion. Like, so your WNBA athletes are not going to get $40 million contracts because that, like, they're looking like they get, I think I looked it up a couple weeks ago. I was just on a tangent on my computer, but they make a higher percentage of the total revenue of the league than NBA players do, of their league. Like, so I get it where it's like, man, look at these huge contracts these guys are getting. But I mean, that's because like they get the revenue. Like, and you can talk about like the product and what it means. And like, I don't want to be too controversial, but like when you have a business that makes X amount of money, you can pay your employees more. And if the WNBA made billions of dollars a year, then those women would be getting those size contracts. And like I would love it if they did, but they just don't right now. And like, and these other leagues, like, but then like there are some instances like women's soccer versus men's soccer, like with the US at least, not on a global scale, obviously, but at least in the US, like, yeah, they should get, like, they win World Cups. They should get moderate, like close, more pay than the men's team who didn't get in the last World Cup. Like, I get that, but it's all dependent on how much your league makes. That's as much as there's one pot they can take from.
Mm-hmm. And I think a perfect example of this, and this is probably the last thing I'll say on this, but this isn't necessarily about salaries necessarily, but it makes sense in the same way. Like, if you look at like a college athletic program and how much stuff and how much just ability to resources are pumped, say a football team versus just even take a baseball team or take any of these non-revenue sports per se, right? A football team literally pays for the entire athletic department at some schools.
Oh yeah,
that's how much money they can bring in.
It
right?
pays for the entire school besides tuition.
Exactly.
Like, it pays for professors' salaries.
Money they can bring in, right?
Yeah.
So obviously they're going to get taken care of more than these other teams. It's just than a baseball team. Even if the baseball team's really, really good, they aren't bringing in the fans. They aren't bringing in the TV revenue. They aren't bringing in the endorsements. They just aren't doing that, right? So it just makes sense. It's just dollars and cents. I mean, that's like you were saying. Like, if the WNBA made as much money as the NBA, the WNBA players would make more money. That's just basic economic sense. That's basic dollars and cents. Thinking. And unfortunately, that's just not the case right now. So that's where we're at.
Yeah.
And it's the same sense, in college athletic departments. Football teams pay for these colleges. Western U of M paid Western like a little bit over $1 million a couple years ago to play. Western gets their butts kicked, but that over $1 million pays for multiple other non-revenue sports for their entire season.
Yep.
So it's just like, it just makes economic sense that football team is obviously going to get taken care of a little bit more. So
it's like
it's the same idea.
When Michigan baseball is good and is getting to the College World Series and like into the round of 16 and stuff. Yeah, like that's awesome. They should get like some recognition for that. But they still aren't bringing in 115,000 people. Like there is just not that many people coming to the
7, it would still make way more. Like you wouldn't even have to do.
Yeah, like so it's just like, if you want to talk about whether they deserve it, getting back to like the question and whether they should have those things, like don't say, oh, we need as much as them. It's just like, no, we just need more people with eyes on us. Like, let's just keep working on our product on the field. Let's keep working on that program. If an athletic director at a school just neglects a sports program that's successful, like that's a position of no, don't do that. But Michigan football is going to get the most recognition. Duke basketball is going to get the most recognition. Like, that's just going to happen, and it's just a reality of how those systems work. And maybe a next discussion question sometime can be, I don't know, college athletes getting paid, but
yeah. I think it's more of a marketing problem than it is a dollar problem.
Yeah.
I think if you look at it that way, if you have a problem with it, I should say. But.
Yeah, no, good stuff today, guys. Really picking brains, yeah. So then I guess next week we'll go from the debate of the top 5 tight ends. How about that?
Yeah, we can really bounce. We can really go round and round with that one. That'd be pretty fun.
Yeah, there's definitely at least 5 elite tight ends that have played in this NFL lifetime. Even though the position has changed on its.
I can think of 3 or 4 right now off the top of my head that we could kind of debate pretty good. So this will be pretty fun. Yeah,
for sure. So we'll see you guys next week for episode 31. Appreciate you checking out the 6Three podcast. Check us out, the6three.com. And then also on YouTube at the 6Three podcast, Instagram at the 6Three, and Twitter at the 6Three. And just keep up with us. Subscribe. Make sure you don't miss the next episode. Yeah. All right. Take care, guys.
Yes.